I love it. Thank you. So good. It's a little, I think we call that subliminal advertising or something along those lines. Yeah, we wanted to just be light with this thing. You know, it's a funny thing. I've been involved in consciousness work for a while now, and I've always noticed there's certain things that will trigger people. And one of them can be money, you know, particularly when we're talking about my money, right? And so we thought we'd just have fun. You know, it's a funny thing, speaking to this song, that there's this mentality sometimes that goes with spiritual organizations that it somehow happens just because it's God's work. And it does happen because it's God's work, and it also takes a certain something. So somebody once said about Gandhi, they said, you know, it's so wonderful that Gandhi has chosen this path of poverty and this path of peace to bring transformation to the world. And one of his assistants says, you just need to know it takes a lot of money to keep Gandhi in poverty. So we're having fun. We've been looking at this idea, though, which is because money is just a symbol. We were talking about this in class recently, that if you take out a $1 bill and you take out a $100 bill, and you look pretty closely at them, they're very similar. Same size, same color ink, same paperweight, same everything. In fact, if you couldn't see, you couldn't really tell which is more. But one has more because we have agreed that it has value. Not because it's intrinsically worth more, but because we have made a collective agreement about the worth of said thing. So I always like to remind myself that we assign the value to everything. We assign the value to everything. Life at the outer level is just symbols, is just outpicturings, is just stuff. And we assign the value. Some of us like to decide whether things are good or bad. Some of the things like to decide things are right or wrong. Some of the things we like to say are that's either them or us. We assign the value. We either are inclusive or we're exclusive. The purpose of unity, the principles of unity, I always have loved our title, our name, that we are united, that we are one with. You see, the word universe comes from a word that means one song. Right? And so life is just singing this one song, and we're all part of it, and some of us are joining in the choir, and some of us are not. But it's not because it's not available to us. Emmet Fox once said to us that you can have prosperity no matter what your present circumstances may be. That the law gives you the power to attain prosperity and position without infringing upon the rights or opportunities of anyone else in the world. And so when we take a look at this idea of living in the flow, too often we allow ourselves to be conditioned by conditions. You know what I mean? We take a look at our circumstances and go, well, I couldn't do that, whatever that is for you. Perhaps we've come up with a well-exercised excuse. Too old, too young, too fat, too thin, too tall, too short, too whatever, right? And it's only our excuse because we've chosen it to be. So I find over and over and over for me that my work is to break through what I have perceived the limitations are, right? Jesus did say to us, if we know the truth, then that truth sets us free. Now, this is not to say we should not pay attention to the conditions. This is not to say we shouldn't pay attention to the facts. This is not to say we shouldn't do the things of the world, but the world does not set us free spiritually. We have to find that place within ourselves that rises above current conditions and chooses to love, to grow, to serve, to be a place through which the divine can make itself known. So I've I love this book, and I've been referencing it throughout the month, of Lynn Twist, and she talks about the soul of money. And her conversion, if you will, was going from a very prosperous, on the ladder, climbing, playing the game. Her and her husband were making a lot of money. They had a very successful business. They were doing all the right things, getting bigger, faster, better cars, bigger houses, more stuff. And they kind of had a moment of realization. Not that any of that was bad, but the things that they valued were becoming less and less in alignment with what they were creating. And by that I mean she had this realization that the nanny was experiencing all the joyful moments, the first words, the first steps, the first things, that they were creating all of this stuff. And when you get on that, the more is more mentality, then what you have now is not enough, because there's always something bigger, better, faster, more flashy. So they just had a conversion experience, which didn't really change their condition. They didn't decide to go live in a hut somewhere. They still had a lovely home. But they began to reevaluate what was their purpose, what was their values, and what they wanted to accomplish with the good that was in their life. She moved into a project called the Hunger Project. And the Hunger Project simply has as a mission, as an idea, that it is ridiculous that there is hunger on this planet in the time in which we live. And it is not because there's not enough. You see, we always come back to the idea that God is all there is. God is all sufficient. We produce plenty of food. We produce all of the things necessary. What gets in our way are old mindsets. Right? Even when people talk about the economy, so much of that is a mindset. We collectively decide the economy is good, and then we do things as if they were. And then, lo and behold, it looks good. And then we freak out and we do things that, right? But it all flows from a mindset. So they began to look at this, and she began to be involved with this calling in her heart to make a difference on the planet. And so she moved into fundraising around this hunger project to end hunger in our world. So she talks about this story. She's kind of new, but she's getting her sea legs. She's making a lot of presentations. When you're doing fundraising, you go, you present, you talk to people, you do things. And so she was going all over, traveling to, anybody listen, you talk. I feel that way sometimes. It's gotten so bad that sometimes for example, the other day I opened the refrigerator, there's 2 heads of lettuce in there, and I started into a whole talk on something. So, you go where the audience is. Ba-dum, boom. Right? No, so she was going everywhere. Well, so it turns out there was a corporation that got themselves into ethical challenges. And so they hired a good PR agent. The PR agent said, you got to do good work in the world. So she gets invited to this corporate CEO's office to talk about this hunger project and the donation that they would be asked to make, or that they would like to make. She said, I had this not right feeling about the whole thing, but it was also a significant donation. So she goes and she meets with the CEO, and he's like, thanks for being here. We think the work you're doing is really great. Here's a check for $100,000. Thanks for your time. And so she took it and left and still didn't feel right, and put the check in her briefcase and sat with that. The next night she's in Harlem, speaking to a mostly black church, and not a particularly wealthy community at that time, and shared her vision and the difference we could make. And she said, one by one, all of these sweet people came up and started dropping dollar bills and $5 bills and $20 bills into this basket. And she thought to herself, these people probably don't have a lot. And so she spoke with one woman, and the woman said, honey, I don't have a lot, but I know that I have to do good with what I have. And therefore, I want you to have this. And so she left that night with a briefcase full of 1s and 5s and 20s. And she said, I've never felt more abundant, more prosperous, more loved, and more supported. And so she had this realization that by taking that $100,000, it was blood money, if you will. And so she returned it. She got so clear that it's not only what we give, but the intention we give it with. You see, Jesus said this to us. He said, it's not what you give, it's as you give. As you give, so shall you receive. And so if we're giving to get, that's not the highest place we come from. But when we give from our sufficiency, when we give from the fullness of life, then we're truly giving. You see, it's a wonderful thing that this idea that we talk about, our mindset, our consciousness, our way of being, is the determining factor of our lives. And so I've had a chance to chat with so many of the people who support this community. And their support is about love. Their support is about joy. Their support is about being in alignment with the mission and what we're here to do. When we look at our world and, what a week. Oh my gosh. Assassination attempts and bombing attempts and shootings in synagogues and, you just go, if you let yourself go, what is wrong with this world? And what is wrong with this world is there's still too many people that believe in separation. You see, that is always the thing that precedes bad things happening, is that sense of otherness. The other, as we would call it, doesn't matter what the other is. And so the journey that we've been on, part of why I love being in America, living as an American, is not that we have a perfect history, but that we keep striving for that more perfect union. As Abraham Lincoln said, to tap our better angels, that we are given a promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we continue to work towards a better world. What unity provides is a way of thinking, a way of being in alignment with spiritual principles, but it doesn't make anyone else wrong for practicing their faith the way they're led to practice their faith. That's a beautiful thing to me. It's the thing that has always appealed to me. I remember being a kid in Sunday school, 10 years old. I have a question. It's that annoying kid in Sunday school. I have a question. And my question was basically, you mean to tell me that people that don't believe what we believe are going to go to hell by a loving God? I didn't get it then. I don't get it now. Lots changed over the years. But what I now know, what I now believe, is that we're all one. That there's one race called the human race. One religion, that should be kindness. One path, even though we find many ways to get to the mountaintop. And so for me, unity represents the best of Christianity, but with an openness to all religious traditions. It does not need to make anyone else wrong. And in my journey, the more I've studied comparative religion, from the inner level, the more commonality you find. At the heart, there's always some version of the golden rule. Be kind, treat others the way you want to be treated, love one another, nurture one another, welcome the stranger. I mean, you just see over and over. Now, how it's practiced at an outer level, then it gets into all kinds of stuff. You wear all kinds of different outfits and all kinds of different things, but I don't know that the divine really cares what we wear over our head, what kind of underwear we have, or any of the other things that help bind us back to what we know. My thinking so far. I'll get back to you if that changes. Right? So we're learning, practicing, being vigilant in staying in spiritual truth. And the times in which we now live are challenging that at a deeper level. I choose not to be dismayed by the things of the world. It's not that I don't feel them. I feel them deeply. But what I continue to believe is, as Martin Luther King said, that the long arc bends towards justice. The long arc builds towards an awareness. And even as we position ourselves to move into this new paradigm, there is that old way of being that wants to hold on. You see, paradigms usually don't shift without some struggle before it emerges. Right? And so when we see that there is a birthing taking place around us, there is an awareness of who we are. You see, Barbara Marx Hubbard, who's a futurist, wonderful woman, spoke to this years ago, and she said, we should understand what's happening at an evolutionary level. If you understand the physical body, we have all these systems, circulatory system and a respiratory system and a nervous system. And the nervous system is really cool because if you stub your toe, you know it immediately. If you put your hand on a hot stove, you know it immediately. And it's saying to you, hey, idiot, move your hand. You know, some of us choose to say, no, I'll just suffer. It's God's will. I was like, no, it's just pain. Move your hand. She said, what we should understand, and this was, when 24-hour news happened, this little invention called CNN. Remember how radical that was? She said, what we should understand is that we are now establishing a global nervous network system. So when we stub our toe in Africa or in Pittsburgh or in some other part, we know it immediately. Because there's a global mindset that is emerging. So when I start to see that, some people are like, what's happening to our world? And it's like, I don't think that our world is all that different, but we are much more aware of it much more quickly. In the midst of everything else that's going on, the things that makes the news, there are simple acts of kindness and humanity. There's a little thing that popped up on social media just recently. It's one of those sweet little stories about a policeman that had to go to a house for a domestic violence case. And they got it situated. The guy ended up going to jail. This sweet little mom and her sweet little baby, they realized no food, one diaper left. And so in writing his report, he said, we made arrangements to have their needs taken care of. And so as somebody kind of investigated, what does that statement mean? He went to his church. He went to the grocery store. He went to his wife and their own pantry and got enough food and enough diapers and enough so that little family would be taken care of in the midst of crisis. Now, that didn't make breaking news. They didn't stop the presses to tell us about that. But those are the things that go on over and over and over and over. And so let us not be too dismayed. Let's not ignore what's happening in the world, but let us not think that that is reality. And let us each work to have a more just and a more loving and a more compassionate world. See, I don't know what to do about everything in the world. I mean, I have some theories, and if anybody wants to listen, I would certainly be willing to tell you, but nobody's really checked in with me on a really powerful level. President hasn't called, Congress didn't let me know, So, but I do know what to do with my life. I do know what to do with the people that are in front of me. I do know what to do with my family. I do know what to do with this church. And that is to keep creating a loving environment where we remind ourselves and each other of the best that is within us. To hold that high vision for who we are. You see, I love that we get to come together around an idea of our possibility. Think about that. Where else do you do that? Work? Everybody say, hey, who will you become today at work? And they're like, where's my spreadsheet, right? I mean, right? We have a place that says, you know what? I know what you're going through, but I believe in who you are. And who you are is not dismayed and not controlled by these circumstances. Sickness is not the end product. Situations are not the end product. Who we are is evolving into something more. I have a coach that I've worked with a program by the name of Rod Hairston. And he says we have to remember some things, some fundamental things about our minds and about who we are. He says, first of all, he says, good habits are hard to start, but easy to live with. Bad habits are easy to start, but hard to live with. Right? You notice that? Harder to get started, but once it becomes the habit, it's easy to live with, makes your life easier. Bad habits, easy to start, but eventually become much harder to live with. And he says, so we have to have this shift. Lynn Twist says in this idea that there are these myths, toxic myths about money. And one of them is about scarcity, that there's not enough. That there's not enough. When if we really look at it, there's more than enough. Way more than enough. And even, so she says, so the shift, the great shift comes, the surprising truth, as she calls it, is insufficiency. Sufficiency, which is different. You see, there is enough. It's learning to love what is. When they were on that ride of more is more is more is more, you don't catch up with it. But when you realize what we have right here, right now, is sufficient, and I will love it, and I will be grateful for it, that's the basis of prosperity. There's this insane that we are like a person standing in a stream, dying of thirst. Right? Standing in thirst, going, where's the water? So Rod says, some simple tools. Sounds familiar. What you focus on, you find. Have you noticed that? There's no good or bad about that, but just notice what you focus on, you will find. And so if we start with the premise, Jesus said it very simply, seek and you'll find. Now, if you look for rotten people, there's a few of them, and if you can't find them, I've got a list. But if you look for loving, compassionate, wonderful people, you're probably going to find yourself at Unity of Charlotte. What can I say? Then he says, what you focus on seems real. Right? What we focus on seems real. Whatever we focus on, it seems real. Sometimes we're even willing to argue about how real it is. And he says also, what you focus on grows. Right? We talked about that a couple weeks ago. What we appreciate, appreciates. And then he says, and what you focus on, you become. So the question we must ask ourselves is, what am I focusing on? Where is my attention? Where is my heart and soul? Am I grateful for what is right now? For all of the blessings, even when those blessings look like challenges. Sometimes we call them first world problems. Every once in a while, when I'm like, I listen to myself. See, I don't talk to myself the way I always talk to you. I just, a little moment of self-disclosure. I have these moments. And then this other part of me goes, get out your little violin, Get over it, right? These are first world problems. Most of the problems we deal with are first world problems. And thank God we have a way of approaching reality that says, be not bound by this situation, but rise above it. And rise above it first in consciousness. And then all these things shall be added unto you. So where are we placing our focus? What are we putting our attention? For me, it comes down to living the rewarding life is learning to love. Not conditional love. Not the kind of love that says, if you behave, I will love you. But the kind of love of the agape that Jesus spoke to, the unconditional love of spirit, where we see beyond our humanness and recognize our divinity. Eastern traditions, they call it namaste. I honor the place within you. Right? Then we learn to serve. To live in the flow is to learn to serve others. There's something naturally powerful. And we're learning to grow. We're learning to grow all the time. We can't afford to allow ourselves to get stuck in the pretty good. Right? It's pretty good. It's okay. Right? If we're here and we're committed to the evolution of ourselves and to the planet, we have to be willing to look at those areas where we're stuck, or we're fixated, or we're believing the old mythology. This teaching gives us the opportunity to do the deep work inside of our own being. And in doing the deep work inside of our own being, circumstances often change. There's a great line I refer to often in the Course in Miracles when it says, when you go into prayer, one of two things will change. Either situations will change, or perception will change. Either way, it's a healing. Right? When we love and value and honor what is, it's a beautiful place. So money is just another way to allow ourselves to experience our divine magnificence. How do I show up in life in this area, in this area, in this area? Is it consistent? Am I living in the flow, recognizing the eternal as my source and my supply? We've got to be willing to let go of shame and blame and otherness to move into that place of being, recognizing we are blessed. We get to take responsibility for who we are. You see, we've been given a gift. We've been given a gift. We've been given two. One, we're blessed to be on the planet. Two, we're blessed in this room to recognize we're spiritual beings on this planet. A whole lot of folk that don't know that. And so with that comes a responsibility to live and to work towards a higher level of existence. Marianne Williamson famously wrote, "You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." We are in interesting times. And it becomes more dependent on each of us, I believe, in this time as we move from an old paradigm to a new paradigm, that we choose which side of that we will be on. the blessing / curse of unity is it's not something we do for an hour on Sunday. It's what we do with the rest of the week that matters. How we are on the freeway. I'm just going to go there. That's the test, isn't it? Right? Oh, I'm so enlightened. Ooh, that wasn't very enlightened. It's all right. We're all growing, right? So just know that right here, right now, you are a child of the divine. There's a light within you, and that the more you allow that to shine, the more you help others, you liberate others to have their light shine as well. Let us pray. As we move into that awareness of the divine, the one life ever present, always available, expressing in and through and as all of creation, we remember right here and right now that this one life is expressing through us, as us. It is the intelligence that beats our heart, that breathes our breath, that manifests itself in every cell and every system. It is written, closer than hands and feet, nearer than my breath, is the presence of the divine. And when we remember that, we remember there is a wisdom and intelligence greater than our own personal wisdom and intelligence. There is a love that is greater than our own personal love. There is a peace that passes human understanding. And so when we remember, when we rejoin with that awareness, we become powerful through the light of God's love. And so we call forth the truth. We speak of the word of truth, knowing that health is revealed as wholeness at every level of being, from the spiritual to the physical, through every cell and every system. Wholeness exists and expresses fully. We recognize and know that we are abundant beings right here and right now, and we joyously participate in the divine flow of God's bounty. We recognize and know that there is indeed but one love, the agape love, the unconditional love of Spirit. So we choose to forgive freely, to allow love to heal and transform. We allow the light to shine and the dark knows it not. How good it is to know this truth, and how grateful I am for this opportunity. We extend a blessing to our brothers and sisters. We extend a blessing to all communities of faith. We know there are many pathways to God, and therefore we honor and celebrate them all. And so in joy and in gratitude, I simply speak this word, and through the power of the living Christ, I release it into the law of mind, knowing that it goes forth to serve the highest good for all concerned. In joy and in gratitude, then, I simply give thanks. I allow it to be so, as together we say, and so it is. Amen.